The first issue we're going to tackle is retirement systems. And you may have noticed that there has not been a full-scale attack on retirement systems yet this year, and there's always still time in the session. But even if not, a lot of what we know is that if we don't turn things around in this election this year, public pensions and retirement security for everyone is going to be eroded and going in the wrong direction next year. So as some of you know, both of these gentlemen are two great friends of the Iowa Federation of Labor. Our friend Alex Drzymski moved on from a new adventure at the AFSCME political department, and he's now the campaign director of the newly formed Iowa Coalition for Retirement Security. And Brad Hudson is a government relations specialist with the Iowa State Education Association, and he's no stranger to the IFL either. He's a great friend to us and our organization. Brad is a pension expert, and he serves on the Benefit Advisory Committee for IPERS. So the mission of the Iowa Coalition for Retirement Security is simple, and this is something that was started by the Iowa State Education Association, by AFSCME, by the IFL, and many of your unions here in this room as well, with this idea in mind that we need to start talking about this issue and prepare to fight back against it. With 45% of American households with no retirement savings, retirement security is in crisis. Hardworking Iowans deserve better. Together, we are holding accountable those who will make the retirement crisis worse by standing up and advocating for retirement policies that will help working families. So with that, please give a warm welcome to Alex Drzymski and Brad Hudson.
I want to thank Charlie, Ken, everyone here for inviting us today to talk about this. Most days I have to spend over at the Capitol, and I'm glad that the AFL-CIO now has you having officers that you can report harassment to. I think what I heard, Charlie, was discrimination, harassment, or unwarranted behavior. I'd like to turn in the Iowa Republican Party because they don't respect and they don't treat hard-working men and women like yourselves the way they should. And I'm honored, truly honored to be here today with you. Last year was not fun. This year hasn't been much better. But I know with a room full of activists like you, understanding these tough subjects that we need to understand, and knowing there's an election coming up this November, I know that in this room is the energy we need, the ground force we need to make sure that collective bargaining returns to Iowa, that public pension systems remain in place, and that we go back and fight for private sector to put back in defined benefit plans in place of defined contribution plans, because as the author, the creator of the 401k said last year in the Wall Street Journal, I never created this to be the American retirement system. I created it for doctors and attorneys, and politicians got it wrong. So I'm just honored to be here with you today, knowing that we're getting ready for a fight of fights. So with that, I'm going to turn over to Alex to give you a little background on public retirement systems and things I think will help us get ready for next November. So once again, thank you, and I'm going to turn over to Alex here to give you some great information.
Thanks, Brad, and thanks everyone again for being here. This is like Charlie said, it's a turnout that we didn't expect, and I'm really happy to see this. So, like Charlie mentioned, I probably have met a number of you before. Before this, I was with AFSCME Council 61 and on their political team, and so it's too bad I don't get to spend so much time up at the Capitol like I did last year, but I'm pretty happy to be doing the work and working on what we see as probably the most important issue coming down the pike. I don't have my screen in front of me that I normally do, so hopefully bear with me if I stumble a little bit. I'll make sure I try to hit on everything. So who is the Iowa Coalition for Retirement Security? Like Charlie said, that's the new group that we've put together. It was put together by a few different groups. All unions were the first ones to start it with the knowledge that we had this retirement security fight on our hands. Like Charlie said, 45% of Americans don't have anything saved for retirement. And we've seen some steps taken that would worsen that situation for many of our public employees. And that's what really led us to say we need to get out ahead of this, and we need to make sure that those people that are going to put into place those kind of bad policies are not in office come next year. We're growing all the time. We're reaching out to all different kinds of folks and groups, including people that you might not normally associate with, being retirement security advocates, including, business owners. Something a lot of times I don't think we think of when we think of retirement security is the amount of money that IPERS provides to retirees and how that benefits the Iowa economy and how it benefits those business owners. So we think this issue spans all Iowans. It's not about IPERS. It's not about public employees. We just see the imminent threat right now as to IPERS based on some of the steps we've seen taken. So, and that's what we're going to talk about here today. The coalition will provides resources and information to people who are members. But ultimately, what I tell people is I put that we're at the grassroots level for a reason on this presentation. We are a grassroots organization because to be successful, the 400,000 or so people that are on public retirement systems need to get engaged. If 1/10 of Iowa is engaged on this issue, it's a winning issue. And so we really strongly feel that this needs to come at the grassroots level, and we are here to provide the resources to make that happen. It says on there, sign in to commit to take action. We usually have these town halls, and we'll have time for questions at the end, and I'll try to address any of those. But like Charlie said, we've got Brad here. He's an expert on IPERS, serving on the Benefit Advisory Committee. So if you have any of those weedy, in the weeds questions, we should be able to answer them. So starting off with a little history of IPERS, it was established back in 1953, so it's been around for a long time. It's a very successful system. I think a lot of times you'll even hear some of our adversaries admit that IPERS is doing well. But I don't think for a second that that will stop them from making changes to it that will make it not such a great system. Clearly we've seen some things that have been in place, some pieces of legislation that have been in place for a long time that they have no problem changing, even when no one's asked for it. So been in place for a long time, and it's in the law. So it's not just this overall sentiment that the legislature had when they were making IPERS in the Iowa Code. It is in the law. The wording is in the law that it's there to attract and retain a quality workforce through a pension. So it's in the law, and we feel like some of the changes that are being proposed are not in the spirit of that law. So IPERS is a defined benefit plan. I'm sure a lot of you understand what that means, but you'll hear it a lot in the news, and a lot of the general public doesn't understand what that means. So IPERS is a defined benefit plan, meaning it is a guaranteed monthly lifetime annuity from the day you retire to the day you die in a pension. And so that's as opposed to a defined contribution plan, more along the lines of a 401k. And one way, and you can see there how IPERS is calculated. The amount is based on a formula, so it takes your average salary, usually your high five salary, times a multiplier. That multiplier grows by 2% with each year of service for the first 30 years, and then after 30 years, it grows by 1 point. And then a reduction if you get out before a few different rules that they have. One thing we want to make sure everyone realizes is that contributions in IPERS come from the employee and the employer. With a lot of the defined benefit plans in the private sector, all the contributions are coming from the employer. But from the get-go, IPERS has been an employee and employer contribution. So it's 40% employee and 60% employer contributions. One thing that makes IPERS unique and we think serves the program really well is that it's more of an insurance plan rather than a savings plan. IPERS pools its investments, pools its longevity, pools its risk with all of its members. And so with a 401k, it's rather than being more of an insurance plan, it's more of a savings plan. You're saving as much as you can, and hopefully it's there until the day you die. IPERS has a member that's 110 years old. So unless you're saving until you're 110, you're going to run out of money. You're going to run out of retirement. IPERS, because they have actuaries that have studied this, they know the average female is going to live to 86, and the average male is going to live till 84. So in a 401k, you die before you're expected any leftover money. That'll go to your family. In IPERS, because it's pooled, the money that's left over goes back into that fund and goes back to those other IPERS beneficiaries. So we see that as making the system sustainable and healthy, and we see that as an important and positive aspect of IPERS. In IPERS investment performance, like I said, you'll even hear our adversaries talk about how IPERS does well. IPERS returned 11.7% in fiscal year 2017, which greatly outperformed their assumed return rate, which was 7.5. That's since been lowered to 7%, but you can see, regardless, it's outperforming the assumed rate of return by over 4%. So it's doing really well. It's invested really well, and this might be one of the key points of the whole presentation. IPERS investment expenses were 0.6%. Your average 401k is going to run you around 1.5 to 3%. So that money goes to the people in the companies investing IPERS money, and those savings are huge because that results in millions of dollars over time. So, and when we keep hearing, why would legislators want to make changes to this program? We think that bullet point right there kind of sums it up. Those investment expenses the difference between 0.6 and a 3% investment expense is hundreds of thousands of dollars. And who that's going to, we think that's going to a lot of the people who propose this legislation. Your Koch brothers, a group you may not have heard of called the Reason Foundation, their goal is to turn these into 401k style systems that then go to their friends that also fund these campaigns. And just an example of what that kind of savings can look like, we often have people, public employees that say, how can I talk to IPERS with, a millennial, someone young that might not be thinking about retirement? How am I going to convince them that this is something they need to worry about. I think this is a great example. So a 25-year-old who has $25,000 in their retirement account, and they put $10,000 in each year, and they get an average return rate of 7%, what IPERS is assumed right now, and they plan to retire in 40 years. If that person pays just an added 1% in fees, that could cost that millennial more than $590,000 over 40 years of saving. And like we said, that money, that $590,000 that retiree would be losing, that money is going to that 3%, the folks that run these investments and fund these campaigns. Yeah.
Address something on that point. And our adversaries keep coming and saying they're here to help you. Anytime somebody says they're here to help you, I always start to question that. But think about that. 7.6% is the return that IPERS is trying to get. Because 0.6% is what it costs for the investment managers, keeping the lights on, sending out the statements. All the management costs are on that 0.6%. So IPERS is out investing, trying to get a return of 7.6, so their net return is 7%. But our adversaries are out there trying to help you. They're going to give you a better system. And if you're in that 3% administration fee, then you've got to go out and get in a risk portfolio of a 10% return. You think that's going to be better for you or better for someone else? And that's why when you look at that, all they care about are their friends over at, I don't want to name companies per se, but like Fidelity or T. Rowe Price or some private firm that runs a 401k. You're much better off in a 7.6% risk pool than you are in a 10% risk pool to get a 7% return. So it's not that they're looking out for you. They're looking out for their friends. And I think everybody needs to be clear on that point because our adversaries sure try to sugarcoat this one. Thanks, Alex.
You can see there the annualized returns, which are also good. The 10-year, obviously the lowest one, that incorporates the Great Recession. But throughout its history, IPERS has invested well, hired good, some of the best investors in the world, and so it's a fund that does really well. IPERS generally is more conservative than some of its peers, and we like that because while when the market is riding high, we might not rake in as much as some of the other states or pension funds, but also when the economy tanks, we're not going to go in the hole quite as bad as some of the others would, and that allows for a little more predictability, and we just think that's a little more stable and predictable system. So IPERS ranks in the top 14th percentile of peer universe of pension funds. So you can see there, it's in the top 14% of what it does. It's a good, well-funded system that doesn't need changes, especially some of the changes we're seeing. Another group that's part of the coalition is the firefighters. Do we have any people in here on the 411 plan? Great. You might know more about it than I do, honestly, but the 411 plan is shortened the Municipal Fire and Police Retirement System of Iowa. They have about 4,000 current members, current working members, and about 4,000 retirees, so split pretty evenly amongst 8,000 people. It serves as a retirement and disability system for full-time firefighters and police officers, and that's in cities that are over 8,000. So some of your smaller cities, they might be in IPERS. It also serves as a disability system paid for by the employer and the employee. Most members aren't covered by, or one thing that really makes it different from IPERS is that most members are not covered by or eligible for Social Security. So 411 is oftentimes the only source of retirement for those folks. with IPERS, you hear a lot that, the IPERS isn't meant to be your only source of retirement, that there is the Social Security there, and individual plans as well that people have. But 411 plan is often their only source of retirement. And their hazardous working conditions, one reason why it serves also as a disability system is they work in hazardous working conditions, and that makes their lifespan, you can see there, between retirement and death, just an average of 8 years, when it's 16 for the average person. But one thing I kind of alluded to at the beginning is that we really want to focus on and really want to drive home is the fact that those 4,000 retirees pumped $156 million into the Iowa economy last year. That's a lot of money for 4,000 people. And that's a lot of people and businesses that benefit from that around the state. And to that point, IPER's impact to the economy is also huge. When we make these arguments to folks, we tend to talk about how important retirement security is to us, and that's understandable, and we should do that. But we also have this whole other angle of how important it is to our local communities and our local economies. $2 billion was paid in retirement benefits to IPERS retirees last year. 1.7 billion, or 88% of that, went to people in the state of Iowa. And you might be thinking that that remaining 12% went to Arizona, where people are living down in the warm weather, Arizona, Florida, but it's really going to places more like Rock Island, Illinois, or South Sioux City, Nebraska, or Omaha, Nebraska, neighboring communities. So it's just people that live just over the border for the most part. 355,000 people are in IPERS, and we can't lose sight of the fact that they have families, they have communities that they support with those benefits. And one thing that really makes us angry is when we hear politicians say some of these IPERS members are making more in retirement than they did while they were working. But we have a formula, and if you saw the formula, that's not possible, for one thing. But you can see here the average pension benefit, annual pension benefit, is $16,000 a year. That's a pretty modest amount. And so if we're making $16,000, less than $16,000 a year, public employees, we're not doing very good. So if you hear that, call it out, because it's nonsense. And another example of how IPERS helps the economy is it fueled 17,352 jobs last year in Iowa. I don't think we can name another industry in Iowa that would bring in that kind of job numbers. And I say bring in, and I mean that because IPERS. A lot of the economic policies we see from the legislature is to give tax credits, give businesses, out-of-state, out-of-country businesses, give them a bunch of tax dollars to bring in a few jobs and ship that money to those out-of-state corporations. IPERS invests around the globe and brings that money into Iowa, so it's importing billions of dollars. So we see that as a positive thing rather than what we've been doing, which is to give money away for a return of just a few jobs. You should all have a handout of the county benefits paid by IPERS in 2017 to each county and the number of beneficiaries. If you're talking to your legislator, and especially if you live in a rural county, show them just how much IPERS impacts your community. Boone County, $21.7 million. I don't know a lot of businesses or industries bringing in $22 million into Boone County. There might be some, but regardless, that demonstrates the impact right there. And this is just a zoomed in version of central Iowa. But, so, like I said, we've seen some signs coming from some legislators, some out-of-state groups, that changes are coming to IPERS. And we've known since the collective bargaining fight that the next big fight on our hand was probably going to be IPERS. Once July rolled around, a group called the Reason Foundation came into Iowa to, quote, evaluate the true state of IPERS. I don't know that they so much evaluated the true state as they did just push their typical agenda that they do all over the country. But they're here, and they were brought in by Charles Schneider, who just happens to have just become the Senate Majority Leader for the Senate Republicans. So the people leading this fight are also leading that caucus now. So it's we knew that this is something that we needed to get out ahead of. So once that happened in July, we said we need to form this coalition and get out ahead of this and make this an issue that they cannot pass. We cannot let what happened to collective bargaining happen to the retirement security of so many people. Some of their funders, stop me if you've heard of these before, include ALEC, the Koch brothers, the Americans for Prosperity, like we saw in the collective bargaining bill, and a guy by the name of John Arnold. You may not have heard of him before, but this is his big pet project. This is what he likes to do all around the country, is take money from people's retirement and put it in the hands of his friends. John Arnold's a former hedge fund billionaire, worked for a great company called Enron. He has these tactics that he's used around the country. He's used it in Michigan, Arizona, Alabama. But ultimately, his goal is to turn the defined benefit plan that IPERS is into a defined contribution plan, jack up those investment fees, who would go to him and his friends. So you can see there, Enron billionaire frets about public pension solvency. He doesn't care about the solvency of public pension funds. He cares about getting money to investors that are his friends. They advocate for 401k-like defined contribution plans. And when the recession hit back in 2009, IPERS, like every retirement fund, was looking to improve. What can we do better? How can we get out of this hole when the economy's in the tank? Back then, the Reason Foundation had no advice for IPERS. Ironically, when the fund is returning 11.7%, all of a sudden they have all these ideas of how we need to change it and lower our return investment assumption, and how we should ultimately change it to a defined contribution. So you can see right there that that's their agenda. They're not here to improve a bad system. They're here to make a good system worse. Senate File 45. That was a bill written by Senator Zahn from Urbandale. It would do exactly what a lot of these out-of-state groups want to do. I should mention right off the bat, this bill did not make it through the funnel. So it is, this bill itself is not alive, but they can attach anything like this at the end of the year with an appropriations bill. So we're never quite out of the woods until sine die, but this bill itself did not make it through the legislature. But we think it shows exactly what they want to do. It closes defined benefit plans to new members and enrolls new hires into defined contribution plans. This would be a disaster, not just in terms of reducing benefits for retirees. It would dig the IPERS shortfall deeper. You've probably heard about how there's a $7 billion shortfall. That sounds like a big number. They like to scare people a lot with that number. Well, this would increase that $7 billion shortfall by doubling to tripling it to $14 to $20 billion. So why would we want to do something like that? Again, we think we know why, but it makes no sense when you look at the numbers. We had IPERS actuaries actually study this plan, and this is what they came up with, that it would double to triple the unfunded liability. And closing that defined benefit plan would take up to 100 years. Right now, IPERS is on a 30-year path to eliminated that unfunded liability, and this would extend it out to 100 years. So that begs the question, why propose a piece of legislation like this? Again, we think we know why. It's to serve the funders, the people who are funding these campaigns. And you know, they keep saying it. We want to make changes to IPERS because we want to make sure it's there for retirees. We want to make sure it's solid and make sure that our hardworking public employees have that money once they retire. Well, you know what? What you're proposing does the exact opposite. So facts don't matter a whole lot to these folks a lot of times, but we need to know the facts so we can hold them accountable. So the way we're really going about attacking this is talking to those legislators directly. And what I would encourage everyone to ask their legislator today, hopefully, if you can, do you oppose any legislation like Senate File 45 would have done that would turn IPERS into a defined contribution plan? And don't just ask them that question. Ask them, would you do that while you're in elected office? Because what we keep hearing from them is that they are not going to touch IPERS. We have no plans to touch IPERS this year. This year is the two key words that they throw in at the end every time. So we don't want to hear about this year. We know that you know that this year is an election year, and you don't want to piss off 400,000 people. So I don't care about this year. Will you not touch this successful system? Again, it's consistent with what we've seen the Reason Foundation propose, all these out-of-state groups propose, and as we'll see on the next slide, what Kim Reynolds has said. This is a direct quote from Kim Reynolds last year. She said, "We're hoping there will be a way to some kind of a hybrid, so shift to maybe a defined contribution moving forward." I think she's saying things like maybe and a hybrid. I don't know that, we can trust anything that they say, so I'm not going to take her at her word. But she said it herself last year. We think their messaging has kind of gotten a little better this year. Again, knowing that's an election year, they're all saying no plans at all to touch it. But we've seen, they've taken all the steps, they've written the bills, they've had legislators say that they want to do this. Kim Reynolds has said she wants to do this. Why have they done that if they have no intentions? One thing that we really need to stress, that we've actually found this out on our town halls that we've been doing. A lot of IPERS retirees assume that because they've been told for so long that once you're retired, your benefits can't be touched. You're good. The legislature can't touch your retroactively reduce your benefits. That is misguided. The reality is we just never thought it would get this bad. The political environment is worse than it was even 10 years ago. We would never have thought when IPERS was doing this well that these kind of suggestions would be made to the program. So because that political climate has changed, they have new ways that they go about retroactively reducing those benefits. We've seen it happen in Detroit. And what they would do is pass something like Senate File 45 that would dig the hole so deep, $14 to $20 billion in the hole, dig it so deep that they have to go to the courts and say, you know, we can't afford to pay this. We bail us out and say we don't have to pay what we promised. So in Detroit, we saw the courts rule that the average retiree only got 85 cents on the dollar of what they were promised. So that's how they would go about doing it, is passing legislation and then going through judicial intervention to retroactively reduce the benefits that people were promised. So we just need to make it very clear to retirees, people about to retire, that no, you're not out of the woods. We need you in this fight still, because this still does affect you. In Kentucky, they're doing the very thing that I just said. They're going through the process of judicial intervention to reduce benefits right now. You might have seen it in the news recently. And we keep saying this because of the this year qualification that they add. We really feel like it's not a matter of if, but a matter of when this happens. And if the people that would do this are still in office, we feel like that when is next year. They're again going to say they have this mandate. They've been told by the voters that we want to go after public pensions and we need to reduce public pensions and yada, 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 just like we heard last year with the collective bargaining bill. No one asked for that. They know that, but that's what they'll say. We have a mandate because we were told by the voters that this is what they wanted. That's why we feel like this is the biggest issue facing the state. With 400,000 Iowans directly affected by it, if those people can get engaged and get mobilized, 1/10 of Iowans get engaged and mobilized, and maybe get some of their family members, their friends along the way, this is a winning issue, and those people that will do harm to retirement security won't be in office. So that is why we feel like this needs to be an election issue. This needs to be the election issue to get the most bang for our buck, literally. So taking action, the coalition is really focused on what we can do now to motivate people and to influence legislators. Like I said, it doesn't seem like anything is going to pass this year because they are aware that if they piss off hundreds of thousands of people, that's probably not good. That doesn't bode well for their election chances in November. So we feel like it's probably not going to come this year. But regardless, for the November elections, we are trying to get every legislator on record on how they stand on IPERS. So we're encouraging them to talk. We're encouraging everyone to talk to their legislators, ask them to commit to IPERS and public retirement systems in general, and get them on record. We have a lot of good handouts in there. Some of them have. One of them has 5 questions that we think are really good to ask of all your legislators. And let the coalition know what you hear. We're trying to have a cache of responses so we know come election time what everyone has said, so we can inform the public, inform IPERS members that this is what this legislator has said. This is who you should vote for to protect your retirement. And informing the public, one thing we really realize we need to do is try to turn as much of the public around on this issue as we can, or just inform them in general. And so if you would be willing to write a letter to the editor, we think that's a great way we can go about doing that. And you can contact me and let me know that you want to do that at that email address there, info@iaretirement.org. Sharing the coalition Facebook page with anyone who might be interested. Obviously, social media is very important this day and age. So if after this conference you all can like our Facebook page, share it with anyone you think we might be interested, we'd really appreciate that. That would go a long way in expanding our reach. And just follow the coalition for any updates, especially as we get closer to the election. We'll be having more about what different legislators and candidates have said. So in talking to your legislators, there's a wide array of ways you can do that. But the best way we see is going to their legislative forums. And who here has been to a forum this year and has talked to their legislator? Okay. I know you don't, Lon. I know Walt Rogers isn't a big fan of coming, but yeah. So on our website, iaretirement.org, you can find every weekend we update it with where your forums are. There's a nice handy map there, shows where and when they are, so you can go talk to your legislators and ask them these questions directly in front of other people, and then again let us know how they responded. So report back what you heard to us, and use the link. There's also a link on our webpage to emailing them. So if they don't have forums or you can't make it, there's a really handy link that takes you directly to whoever you need to email, whoever your 2 elected officials are. So that's really useful, and I would encourage everyone to do that and forward anything that you hear back. So what we're encouraging people to ask is, the first one I think is the big one. Like we stressed here, the economic impact that IPERS has. Will you commit to keeping our community strong by protecting IPERS as long as you're in office? And I should put those in these slides, but we want to make sure we're saying as long as you're in elected office. Would you be willing to put the however many $1 million, use your county graphic map and say, would you be willing to put the $21 million in Boone County at risk by reducing benefits and turning it into a defined contribution plan? Do you oppose any legislation like we've seen, like Senate File 45, that would turn IPERS into a defined contribution plan in the future? And then when they inevitably give you some fluff answer, follow up with, then why have you brought in these out-of-state Koch brothers funded groups? Why has Governor Reynolds said that this is what she wants to do? Why have some other legislators said that this is what they want to do? Why have we seen Senate File 45? Why have these steps been taken if you have no intentions of changing this? So on there, again, I think I've said all this, but there's a lot of good resources on our website, and please utilize our social media and Facebook page. That's a way that we really need to expand our reach. We were only started a couple of months ago, so we need you all to help cast that net out even wider. And with that, we'll take any questions. Yeah. Oh, yeah, sorry.
Flip back to the Senate File 45. Good enough.
Wait for a second.
The 8th Circuit Court's ruling on the fiduciary rule, and a lot of us are private sector. This seems like an overall plan to assault Social Security. A lot of us in the private sector have already been subjected to losing our defined pension plans. And how's this all correlate, and how's this project out onto Social Security?
We clearly think that there's going to be a movement at the federal level. I think Paul Ryan's on record that they're going to be looking at Medicare, Social Security. I think here at the state level, we've already seen the attack on Medicaid. And what's kind of sad is a number of our seniors didn't understand that when they get to Title 19 nursing home assistance, that's Medicaid. So we got a lot of problems going on there. Like we said, we're a retirement coalition. I mean, our big concern this year was IPERS, the 411. We think there are bigger issues coming. So we're ready for all those when they do come. So we're going to keep expanding that. I think in the private sector, you guys understand this. I mean, you've been taken to bankruptcy court and forced over on PBGC. I don't think there are any Teamsters in the room, but Teamsters are going through this right now with their multi-employer plan. They keep going back to the referee to say, can we reduce those benefits? I don't have any confidence in the courts right now to come down on the side of the employees. So I think that's a big concern to have on all fronts. So I think it's important for everyone in this room to get angry and get mad and get motivated to fight for things that we think we need today, tomorrow, and all through our retirement.
Any other questions?
If I could go back and just hit two things. The next presenter is Iowa Policy Project. We'll segue into, I know you guys are just waiting. God, retirement system, now taxes. What was Charlie smoking? This slide here, there's a young lady running around Des Moines by the name of Gretchen Tegler. She's the head of the Central Iowa Taxpayers Association. I never say that anybody lies. Nobody's a liar. But boy, she's sure sharing some misinformation. She keeps saying that if we pass a bill like Senate File 45, it'll save the taxpayers money. The only way that that saves the taxpayers any money, because you'll see the liabilities are going up 14 to 20 billion dollars, is if the retirees take a hell of a cut. Okay, so when she says this is going to save the taxpayers, I understand this well enough. I jump to it's going to screw the retirees. And I want you to be clear on that. And if we can just jump back one more slide, Alex. And I think this forward. Uh-oh, we broke it. But on the previous slide, we were talking about tax issues and how IPERS benefits the state, that 1.7 billion. Of the benefits IPERS puts out, 30% is coming from contributions. 70% is coming from investments. So we're investing in corporations, real estate, treasuries, but we're importing that back into Iowa, that economic benefit. And I'm probably taking a little thunder away from Peter Fisher and Mike Owen on this. But think about this as they start talking. The tax policy of the last 6-7 years has stolen your sales tax dollars, your personal income tax dollars, and shipped them to out-of-state corporations. The commercial industrial property tax credit, the research credit. They're taking your hard-earned money and shipping it out of the Iowa economy. IPERS members are importing. Now, you're also going to hear about a crazy idea of cutting taxes by another 1.1 billion to 1.7 billion. Okay, I had a gentleman at the Viridian Credit Union, because I commented that I don't want another tax cut, and this gentleman said, oh, how could you not want that? I said, because unfortunately I was raised by 2 tax accountants, and I actually read the IRS code for giggles on the weekends. Because those tax cuts are going to go to millionaires, and I'm not one. And they're going to go to out-of-state corporations and big corporations in Iowa. I'm not one of those either. I'm a hard-working man and woman, my family, just like you. And I'm tired of tax policy that keeps screwing us. So, when they say to me, IPERS isn't doing anything for the economy, I'm sorry, 1.7 billion? IPERS members did more than Apple Computers, Microsoft's tech center over here, the Egyptian fertilizer plant, or all those commercial and industrial property tax credits that went to stockholders that don't live here in Iowa. So I hope we all get educated today about IPERS, about tax policy. Yeah, I'd like a tax cut. I'd like a tax cut if it was really going to come and help me and all my friends who are hardworking, the middle class. But I think by the time you get done with the Iowa Policy Project next, you're going to see they're out to screw us again. So I want to thank you for your time today. I want to thank you for sitting through what's not the most exciting subject matter, but one that's important to all of us as we enter into our retirement. And John, I hope we all stay united, private and public. We have a retirement crisis in this country, and we need to get defined benefit plans back everywhere. So I hope we all stay united on this fight. So thank you for your time.